Yo, what's good, E7 fam? Pat here, back with another how to play video, and in this one we'll be talking about the God MC himself, Raz. As with all of my how to play videos, I'll be covering almost everything you could want to know about the character, including things like stats, skills, possible endgame equipment builds for you to try out, as well as PvP matchup knowledge if that's your thing. And in the case of Raz, also how to unlock his specialty change, as well as the various different runes in his skill tree. If this video is of some help to you, please consider leaving a like or a subscribe. Helps me out here a ton. And with our fancy introduction out of the way, let's talk about how to unlock Adventurer Raz, as well as his stats. Raz is a 3-star knight and the main character of Epic 7. His base form is not terribly useful. However, upon completing episode 2 of the main story, you will unlock a specialty change for Adventurer Raz. Adventurer Raz is incredibly useful, and I think almost every single person should have this version of Raz unlocked. He is one of the best PvE characters in the entire game, and he is really strong even in PvP. Pretty much a must-build hero, which is why I am making this guide. He is a Fire Knight of the Libra Zodiac symbol, which means he shares a stat line with ROL. This is heavy foreshadowing, by the way, for how good I think Specialty Change ROL will be in the future. If she has the same stats as Adventurer Raz, she is in very, very good company. Taking a look at Raz's stats, he has 758 attack, 5,826 health, although this is misleading. His actual base health is 6,818. This is due to the health rune that he has in his skill tree. A skill tree is something that all specialty change units have. They are essentially extra passives and bonus stats to make them more akin to 5 stars and less like 3 stars. Throughout this entire stat section, as well as the skill section that we'll be talking about next, we will cover every single one of these runes that is in Adventurer Raz's skill tree. If you were wondering, by the way, this 20% extra health is taking off of the base value of Adventurer Raz's health, which is 4,960, because the skill tree bonus is treated as an awoken. So therefore, if you were to try to compute it with 5,826 and take 20% of this and add it on, you would end up with 6,991 health, which is incorrect. So for all of our calculations, we're again going to be using 6,818 health because, again, that 20% is taken from this 4,960 number as opposed to this 5,826 number. Similarly, it says here that he has 95 base speed, but it is actually 101 due to the courage rune giving him a bonus 6 speed on his base. The defense is still the same at 672, which is a very good number for a knight. 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, 0% effectiveness listed here, although it is actually 25% effectiveness due to the obscurity rune in the skill tree, 12% effect resistance, although you could treat it again as 17% effect resistance due to the achievement rune in the skill tree giving 5% effect resistance to all allies, including Adventurer Raz himself. So as you can tell, very stacked stat line overall, very good HP, very good defense, good starting effectiveness and effect resistance. Only thing you could really knock him on is low speed, but that's to be expected of a knight. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skill section, in the English dub of Epic 7, Raz as well as Adventurer Raz is voiced by Griffin Burns, who you can hear as Tartaglia in Genshin Impact, as well as Doppio in the English dub of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, Raz as well as Adventurer Raz is voiced by Yuya Hirose, who you can hear as Shuji Kayama in the recently released Digimon Survive video game, as well as Heijin Mal in the current 4th airing season of Overlord.
Alright, let's do this.
Adventurer Raz's S1 is X Slash, not to be confused with X Strike from Chrono Trigger, which I constantly make inside my own head. It has a 0.9x attack multiplier, as well as a 4% max health multiplier. This move has a 75% chance to dispel one buff from the target. Additionally, it has 2 runes in Raz's skill tree. The Fruition rune increases the base damage of this move by 10%, and the Order rune has a 100% chance to make this move give an extra 10% combat readiness. Overall, that makes this a fairly good S1. Damage is pretty low, but Raz is a tank, not necessarily a damage dealer. Having 10% combat readiness is very good. It's not quite the 15% that we talk about on the really good S1s, but when you consider that this move also is a dispel on the S1, it's pretty good as far as basic attacks go.
Yeah. I'll protect you.
Raz's S2 is his signature skill, Command Strike. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. It attacks the enemy with a 1.5x multiplier attack before calling in a guaranteed dual attack from the ally on your team with the highest attack. That probably sounds good already, but this move is absolutely ludicrous thanks to the 2 runes that are in Raz's skill tree. The first one is the Wedge rune, which makes it so that there is a 100% chance to grant immunity to not only Adventurer Raz, but the highest attack ally for 2 turns when you use this move. Additionally, the Speed rune makes it so that there is a 60% chance to defense break the target before calling in that guaranteed dual attack.
I hope you're ready. I'll protect you.
Command Strike is probably one of the best moves in all of Epic 7, if I'm being real. It essentially turns each of Raz's turns into an S1 from your highest damaging character. Smart usage and team compositions can turn this move into something really deadly. The defense break that the Speed rune grants means that you can pair Command Strike with a strong DPS character such as Spectre Tenebria or Landy to kill certain heroes in one shot. Other heroes you can pair it with, such as Terranor Guard, can be used to make it so that you have a massively increased amount of combat readiness every time you use Command Strike. Basically, if you don't know, every time Terranor Guard gets a dual attack, he provides 25% combat readiness to your whole team, which can get out of hand if you're able to actually spam Command Strike, which you certainly can, and we'll talk more about that with the Soul Burn later on. The immunity that the Wedge rune grants is also very valuable as it protects not only Raz, but your carry from problematic debuffs such as a defense break, a stun, or even a sleep. Games can be won or lost based on whether or not you actually have that 2-turn immunity on the right characters at the right time, so you should be aware of turn order. I personally have lost a lot of games by not realizing if I had just Command Striked immediately, I would have had immunity on my carry, and therefore something like, say, an Alencia defense break wouldn't actually have killed my character. Raz's S3 is Purifying Flame. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 4-turn cooldown. It has a 0.9x multiplier with a 4% max health multiplier. It is an AoE attack that provides your entire team with a defense buff for 2 turns. Additionally, it heals Adventurer Raz for 20% of his maximum health.
Purifying flame. Burn away the evil. Should we get started?
On top of all that, Purifying Flame has 1 rune in the skill tree, which is the Sun rune. It makes it so that there is a 100% chance for Raz to get 20% combat readiness when he uses Purifying Flame. This helps out with his 101 base speed in the same way that the combat readiness from his S1 does. So overall, Purifying Flame, pretty strong defensive skill. Defense buff is very, very strong in almost every single metagame, especially when you pair it with things like barriers and anti-crit buff, for example. The heal also can decide a number of games. A lot of people like to focus fire Raz, so a clutch Purifying Flame usage can not only help boost up his bulk, but give him just enough health to actually survive. The last rune that we have to talk about is the Solitude rune. The Solitude rune affects only the character on your team in the backmost position. When the affected character receives a single target attack that deals more than 30% of their maximum health, they will receive a barrier for 2 turns. That barrier can only be activated once per battle, but it is worth a whopping 40% of Adventurer Raz's max health. That's going to probably be a barrier somewhere in the range of, say, 9,000 to 13,000 HP. That's more health in the barrier than some of these characters actually end up having overall. So when you consider Adventurer Raz has now an Aureus that he can hold, a defense buff that he can provide with his S3 Purifying Flame, and now this Solitude rune, he provides an almost unparalleled level of mitigation. I would say that in terms of raw mitigation, Fallen Cecilia and him are pretty much the 2 best ones you can play. But when it comes to protecting a specific single carry, only really Troublemaker Crozet is on the same level as Adventurer Roz is now. The Solitude rune provides just so much protection for one single person on your team. And this rune is the primary reason I feel like you are seeing Adventurer Roz make a resurgence in the PvP meta as of the recording of this video. It is a really, really strong barrier and should not be taken lightly. Again, it's around 9,000 to 13,000 health in most cases. I will be putting a table up on your screen so you can actually see exactly how big the barrier actually is. Adventurer Roz's Soul Burn makes it so that the skill cooldown on Command Strike is reduced by 2 turns at the cost of 10 souls. I'm laughing because this is just an absolutely absurd Soul Burn. It's one of the very best in the entire game, and entire strategies, especially in things like Abyss or like a Hall of Trials or an Expedition, is built around. It's just absolutely silly. 2-turn cooldown reduction on Command Strike means that it's essentially always up. So as long as you have 10 souls, this move is never going off cooldown, which means more defense breaks and more spamming of the S1s. And again, depending on which character is on your team, this could be incredibly potent. For Landy, it means you're going to be stacking up that Chief is on the scene passive a ton. If you have Terranor Guard on your team, it means that every time you Command Strike, you're going to be getting 25% combat readiness for the entire team, which is incredibly abusable and one of the most degenerate PvE strategies probably in the entire game. And then you have characters like Roy Mustang from the upcoming Full Metal Alchemist collab. He can also use this to stack up his fighting spirit in a hurry in order to unload his massive S3 AoE damage. So overall, yeah, this is just an absolute slam dunk of a soul burn. Use it early, use it often. As long as you've got souls, it's one of the very best things you can spend it on. I think it's probably the best soul burn that is not an extra turn in the entire game.
This won't be an easy fight. All right, let's do this.
Finally, this is where we would come to Mulligora priorities in the video, but Mulligoras only apply to 4 and 5-star heroes. Roz is a 3-star hero, which means you only need Stigma and Catalyst and Gold in order to actually skill up the character. So there's really no reason for this character to not be plus 15. It really only costs your time and your stamina in order to actually max this character out. The same can be said of the skill tree for all of the runes that we talked about in this section as well as the previous section. It only really costs you time and stamina to run the Spirit Altar to get them unlocked. So I'm assuming that you have this character at plus 15, and I'm assuming that you have this character's skill tree entirely maxed out. If you're like me and have played a number of gacha games throughout the years, you're probably accustomed to having a main character that's basically worthless. I can thankfully say that Roz from Epic 7 is not a worthless main character. In fact, he's really strong. Only Mashu Kirilight from Fate Grand Order is on the same level as him, I feel like, at least from the gachas that I've played. Roz is one of the very best PvE characters in this game, as well as currently one of the best PvP characters as well. A character that is freely accessible to every single player that is this good should not be ungeared in your box. You should have Adventurer Roz unlocked, geared, and skilled up. He will make your life in Epic 7 a hell of a lot easier. Regardless of how you like to play, whether that's as a new player or a veteran, somebody who enjoys PvE or PvP, you can definitely take advantage of Adventurer Roz. The 2 builds that I'm going to show you in this video are a general use PvE build, as well as the current meta PvP build. Let's first talk about that general use PvE build. We are going to be on the speed set with any set of your choice as the offset, whether that's broken set, hit set, resist set, HP set, or defense set. I leave that to you. Looking at the desired stats, I have 1,374 attack. This is Roz's base attack with an I-90 weapon, as well as a 4-star or greater Knight artifact. I have 1,200 defense here. That is probably the minimum that I would want to play on my tank across various game modes. It's going to be a lot higher for PvP for sure, but 1,200 should be a fairly easy benchmark for most players to actually hit. For health, I have 22k, although if you have better health scaling gear, by all means pump it up. You can go 24, 25, 26, 28k, whatever you feel is necessary for him to actually take a punch and keep on living. The speed stat here, I have 230. This is because in PvE, most of the best strategies you can play with Adventurer Raz require him to be a bit faster than usual. If you have really high speed gear and you don't really care about investing it on PvP characters, you can jump the speed up as high as like 250 or even 260 if you so choose. Just don't skimp too much on the defense or the health. The faster Raz goes in PvE, the more command strikes he can leverage, which means that you will be getting more advantage for your team in the long run. So speed is probably going to be the most important stat on this character for PvE. It's not necessarily going to be the case, though, for PvP when we talk about that next. Critical hit chance and critical hit damage are based because this is a tank, not a damage dealer, even though he can facilitate damage. So you don't really care about his critical hits or how much damage they do. For effectiveness, I'm at 85% because that is basically the cap for most PvE bosses at 85% effectiveness. Barring the obvious 15% effect resistance baked into the game, you're pretty much not going to get a better chance than this for actually landing your defense breaks. So 85 is pretty much where you want to land. Any points over it are basically going to be wasted unless in the future there's just a boss with even more effect resistance. Effect resistance here, I have 17%. Remember, it's actually only 12% base, but he does get 5 from one of his rune passives. We don't really care about effect resistance on Raz when it comes to PvE because we're usually just bringing a cleanser or some kind of support with us anyway. Taking a look here at the right side gear, I am on a health percentage necklace and a health percentage ring, although you could play a defense percentage necklace or ring if it has high speed, if that is of your choosing. Boots are speed because, as always, we're trying to take turns in a timely fashion. For the artifact here, I have Sword of Azera listed, which is a 5-star night exclusive artifact for PvE only. It reduces the damage that he takes from elite and boss monsters, which is very good for some levels of Abyss, and it's also fairly good for newer players starting out for the expeditions. Most of the time, though, Adventurer Raz across all game modes will probably be playing Aureus, which is a 4-star artifact you can get from the game's gachas. That is probably one of, if not the strongest artifact in Epic 7. Only really, I feel like Tehagel's Ancient Book is in the conversation with it for when we talk about best artifacts in Epic 7. Most tanks are going to want Aureus. So I leave it to you to decide if you want Sword of Azera or Aureus for your actual character. When I have played Adventurer Raz in the past, I have preferred Sword of Azera for PvE style builds only. Other artifacts you can play are Adamant Shield, which is another damage mitigation source. Not quite as good as Aureus, but it's still pretty good on the character. And then I have Rise of a Monarch here, which I have used in the past on several of my Abyss clears, which you can find here on this channel. Rise of a Monarch obviously is going to give a barrier to someone on your team at the end of each of Raz's turns. So if he's very fast, you'll end up getting some extra survivability for your very squishy carries. That can be, in some cases, better for your team than Aureus. So that's why I've decided to include it. Looking at the per piece average, I have 7% defense, 9% health, 10% effectiveness, and 12 or higher speed average per piece. Thanks in large part to the Solitude rune change in Raz's skill tree, he is currently one of the best PvP characters in the entire game. He is commonly one of the most contested characters in the Emperor and Legend range, at least as of the recording of this video. That may come as a shock to some of you, but yeah, he really is that good right now. And considering Raz used to be a god and he's actually godlike in terms of gameplay, I honestly feel justified in referring to him as the God MC. A joke that hasn't really been used that much since Magneto was a common point character. Yes, that was a Marvel joke, by the way. Anyways, let's take a look at that build. For a PvP Raz, we're going to be on a speed set with a resist offset. You can choose other offsets if it helps you make the stats that I am going to talk about here. You can choose either hit set, health set, defense set, or even immunity set if that will actually work for you. You have a lot of flexibility when it comes to the various different offsets, and it's going to depend, again, entirely on player preference. For the numbers that I am going to show you here, though, we are assuming we are on the speed set with the resist set, so the speed set bonus and the resist set bonus are going to be applied to the actual numbers that you see. For the desired stats, we have 1,374 attack. This is still Raz's attack with an I-90 sword, as well as the artifact Aureus. For defense, we want 1,500 defense, which is a bit higher than the 1,200 for PvE. You need a lot more demanding gear for Raz to be super effective in PvP. So don't feel too bad if you're unable to hit all of the stat thresholds that I'm going to be talking about here. If you, for some reason, you can't get it, you can make some sacrifices here or there until you're able to get the gear to actually get him to look like this. For HP, I have 25k, although realistically, you want to be somewhere closer to like 26.5k or even like 27k. I have played against Razes who are in the 28k range as well. For speed, I have 220. This is the speed that I actually play Raz at. Although I have seen him faster in the 230s, I've also seen slower Razes in like the 210s, for example. Even like 205 is probably fine if it helps shore up the rest of the stats on the character. Critical hit chance and damage are still based for the same reasons we talked about in the last section. For effectiveness, I have 65%. This gives us some skin in the game against characters that might have maybe an effect resistance imprint, for example. And as the game scales onwards, Battle Frenzy will allow us to actually have a chance to defense break some of the higher effect resistance characters that are usually around the 100 ER range or like the 150 ER range. So that's why we have some level of effectiveness. The effect resistance here is 100% to make it as difficult as possible for DPSs to actually defense break or debuff our Raz. Only really dedicated debuffers should be hitting us when we have 100% ER in our kit. Taking a look here at the right side gear, I am on an HP percentage necklace, although you could again play a defense percentage necklace if it makes the stats work for you. Ring is still going to be HP percentage. You could also use defense percentage for the same reason, and you could also choose an effect resistance ring if it has high health, defense, and speed values on it, and you just want to buck the resist set entirely. Boots, as always, are speed so we could take our turns in a timely fashion. The artifact should be Aureus in 99.99% of all cases. Right now, in the current metagame, Adventure Raz is the best Aureus holder in the entire game. Really only Fallen Cecilia can kind of take that Aureus from him if you are looking for just a straight up raw tank. And in those cases, I guess if you wanted to, for some reason, play a super tanky playstyle, you could play Adventure Raz on Adamant Shield and pair him with someone else holding the Aureus, but I don't really recommend it. I am giving you the option here, though, if you're for some reason maybe you only have one Aureus and it's being held by somebody else for another game mode, then yeah, you could go Adamant Shield, but Aureus almost always should be the artifact on Adventure Raz if you're going to be playing him in PvP. Taking a look at the per piece average, we have 15% defense, 18% health, 10 speed or better, and then 7% effectiveness and 11% effect resistance. You'll notice that that is 5 stats that you need. In order to actually make that a reality, you are going to need some level of flat HP and possibly even flat defense on your necklace and ring. So make sure you're able to actually hit the stats by making sure that you have that bonus flat health on those pieces. One final thing to note here is that the 720 HP from the imprint on Raz is also factored in to all of the percentage stats needed here. So if you for some reason want to play his team-wide imprint, then you will need to end up having more stats or be okay with actually losing out on that 720 health. Normally in the teammates section, I only talk about PvP teammates for the character, but considering Raz is so good in PvE as well as PvP, I figured I'd include some PvE heroes as well. The characters that I'm going to talk about in this section are, for the most part, really powerful in tandem with Raz. They can allow you to clear some of the game's most difficult Dagger Sakar challenges and are also the cornerstone of many of the best Abyss strategies. When we look at what makes Raz strong, it is obviously going to be the fact that he can hold Aureus and his S2 command strike as well as that powerful soul burn. So you want to pair him with teammates like Kitty Clarissa, Camilla, and Tamarin. All of these characters have an ability that enables a guaranteed dual attack from someone in your team with the highest attack. That is very akin, obviously, to Raz's command strike and allows you to double up and get a ton of value between those characters. When we take a look at damage dealers to pair with Raz, you're usually going to want to pick characters that enable a really powerful strategy like Terranor Guard. When he triggers a dual attack, it gives combat readiness to the whole team. So when you actually pair Terranor Guard with Raz and the aforementioned characters like Kitty Clarissa, you can have a team composition that will take way more turns than the opponent that you're actually fighting. The other school of thought is to pair him with a very powerful single target attacker that will hit like an absolute truck. So consider pairing him with a character like, say, Sermia or even Spectre Tenebria in this case. Taking a look at the PvP side of things, Raz really is going to want to have some form of cleanser or some form of support. So characters like Mediator Kowarik or Dien are perfect for that role. Having the anti-crit from Dien as well as the barriers is a godsend. And obviously, again, those cleanses from Mediator Kowarik as well as the attack buff and the barrier from his S2 can make it very frustrating for your opponent to actually get to and kill your carries. Speaking of carries, he is very good again with characters that have strong S1s. So think of characters like Spectre Tenebria again, and it's not really lost on me that he's really strong with not only Mercedes, but Archdemon Mercedes as well. Both of these are exceptionally good teammates to put in the back line to protect with that Solitude rune. They can essentially take over a game if they are protected long enough. So yeah, pretty cool that both the main characters, Raz and Mercedes, are really, really synergistic. Let's talk about bad matchups for Adventurer Raz. The first thing I want to talk about are tank busters like Hua-Yong and Straze. These are characters that are designed to kill characters like Raz in one hit. Also, these characters are much faster than Raz and will usually get to their first turn and use their S3 before Raz has any actual game impact. So if your opponent has picked a character like Hua-Yong first, it's probably not a good idea to pick Raz into that because, again, he'll just die and you won't actually get any value out of the character. Also note that the Solitude rune in Raz's skill tree only really protects from single target attacks, which means that he's not super good against a very heavy AoE DPS composition. Yes, he has Arya, so he can work in a pinch, but those kinds of characters can again mitigate what makes Raz really, really great right now. Especially if it's a character like Landy, who can take advantage of the defense buff and get an extra full burst or two out of it and get that extra defense pen AoE attack. And a character like Lionheart Sermia is pretty much the same story. She is basically cashing in and getting value every time you use the S2 command strike on Raz. And we've already talked about how important that is to his actual kit. Other than that, his only really bad matchups that I can think of are going to be things like cleave openers, things like Closer Charles. They basically are just trying to go super fast, give an attack buff to the entire team, and cleave you before you actually get any value off of anybody on your team. Or a character like Desert Jewel Basar. He can work in a pinch as a cleave opener, and he's also very, very strong against Raz as well. All they need to do is trigger the Solitude rune on the backline character to get that massive barrier onto them, in which case Desert Jewel Basar can just use his S2 and use the barrier inversion on it and just instantly kill whatever character you are trying to protect. Lastly, let's talk about good matchups for Adventure Raz. And honestly, as of right now, pretty much every good matchup is going to be one that's not one of his bad matchups. I know that sounds kind of like a cop-out, but he's really strong and very safe versus most of the things in Epic 7. What he really excels against is, again, diminishing the value of strong single target damage dealers thanks to that Solitude rune buff that he got in his kit. He's particularly good against those not super high damage single target attackers that are trying to grind out the game. Characters like Apocalypse Robbie or Alencia, for example. And again, the Solitude rune does provide you some very powerful protection against strong single target DPSs. Think of characters like maybe, say, a Remnant Violet. So yeah, again, as long as you are fighting against a primarily single target team that's not really trying to have a lot of tank busters, not really trying to leverage a lot of AoE, and isn't really trying to go all in on cleaving you, you're probably going to have a good time with Adventure Raz. And honestly, even in some of those cases that we just talked about in the bad matchups, you still might be able to squeak out a win because, again, Raz is just really strong right now, and the teammates that pair well with him are very synergistic and make for a powerful core that's very difficult to lose with. And that's going to do it for how to play Raz, or I guess in this case, Adventurer Raz. Hopefully this video was of some help to you. As always, if you think it'll help somebody else, please consider sharing it out with them as well. And let me know down in the comments, not only if I missed something, but what other characters you would like to see on an upcoming version of how to play. If you want to see more guides in the same style, there should be a playlist on your screen now. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye now.